could probably do another recording with just as many great sites,
Oh,
and probably
absolutely.
another one again. But I'm going to start off with Inverness, modern day Scotland, and the site of the Clava Cairns, because the Clava Cairns are very important. And the reason they're important is they are a scheduled, protected monument by Historic Scotland. They are a site which has been well recognised, a popular tourist destination. They've
It's
had
a
they're
burial
on
site, correct?
yeah, it's a early Bronze Age set of cairns, and they are now popularly known because they're on the Outlander tourist trail, because it's the site that apparently inspired the author who wrote the books that the TV series subsequently came from. And I've been talking about the Clava Cairns recently because even though I dug there and surveyed there when I was a student in 1998, 99, I think around that time, with Professor Richard Bradley, who went on and published about the monuments.
Hmm.
Now there's been lots of international controversy because a lady came on holiday and took away a little pebble and some bits of tree from it, and it caused all manner of TikTok drama discussing the ethics of taking things away. And the point is, though they were small items, the principle is leave
Leave
nothing
it
but
there.
footprints. Take only
Yeah,
photographs. You know,
we have that discussion a lot in America when it comes to finding arrowheads and, indigenous artifacts and things like that.
absolutely.
In some of your more rural country areas, people will just collect them, not thinking nothing of it, not call and report it. Um, because, who knows? They could have just picked up an arrowhead that was on a town that we don't know about. Um,
Exactly.
and so it's like, yes, leave only your footprints, take pictures, report it, and you'll get credit, and your
Yes.
name will be attached historically to whatever site this is.
Exactly. It's bad enough when it's in a field, but and you find it in a ploughed field, and it's you don't report it to the landowner, you don't report it to the local museum, or the in Scotland they have slightly different rules, but the point is there's always an authority you can report this to. But what's really cool about what's frustrating about the Clava Cairns is it's such a well visited site. It's received vandalism before, and so it's important we challenge when people do even the tiniest amount of damage, even though it may seem out of proportion. It's really important. But the Clava Cairns are amazing. They're very close to the Culloden battlefield,
Wow.
obviously the last major battle on British soil in the middle of the 18th century, where Bonnie Prince Charlie was finally defeated by the government forces, and all manner of mythologies surround the landscape. But the monuments themselves are three of a broader landscape of tombs, but three are in the guardianship area called the Balnuaran of Clava. And there are two passage graves, which means they're circular, with central chambers going into a corbel roofed central chamber. And they have a stone circle around them. So they're like a weird
Right.
composite of passage grave and stone circle together. And then in the middle between these two passage graves, which are orientated on the southwest on the midwinter sunrise,
I'm looking at them
sunset.
now. Yeah.
Sorry, getting my way around. I always get this wrong. The midwinter sunset. They are. There's a ring cairn which doesn't have a passage, and we think these were used for burial, for cremation and inhumation, but mainly cremation, and they were in use in the third millennium BCE. So this is the late third millennium BCE. So we're looking at the early Bronze Age in Britain. So they're
Now,
really old. Four and a half
what's
thousand
the
years old.
what's the landscape look like
Yeah.
at that
So this is
time?
this would have been a wooded valley. So it would have been near a major river. It would have been a place where people came together for ceremonies, gatherings, but they would have been fishing, hunting, gathering, and farming, because for over 2,000 years people had been farming the landscape in Britain. The first farmers get here
Yeah.
around 4,000 BCE, so about 6,000 years ago, and so these are deep time farming communities. So they would have been hunting and fishing, but they would also have been farming in the valley. So they were probably living in and around the tombs that they were building for their ancestors, and we don't know who got to be buried in them. And but maybe it's not easy to say, oh, the chiefs were, or the
Right.
top, and impose all our biases of it would have been a male-dominated society. It would have been,
We
we
have
don't
no idea.
know all of those details. It's speculation, but we do think that maybe it would have been leading families who, down the generations, would have buried the dead. But the tradition of Clava, because they used to be thought to be Neolithic, because they're very similar to monuments over 1,000 years older to 500 years older, found in Orkney and elsewhere. But actually,
Right.
the fact they've been radiocarbon dated to the early Bronze Age means that even in their time, they were doing something that people had elsewhere had stopped doing, which is using these tombs. So probably they were kind of, you could see that it's not about saying they're a bit backward. It's just saying that they were doing something that everyone else thought was old hat fashioned, and they were
Right.
building these tombs. But it's a spectacular site on a little ridge, a flat ridge above the river. So it would have been well drained. It wouldn't have been flooded, but it would have been close to water, and a place where people would know, be familiar with. They would perhaps be living there all year round, but some people would have been moving with their animals and hunting and going off into trading, and there would have been extensive trade by this point in copper and tin and to make
Yes.
bronze, host of other precious materials. So these communities would have been well connected across the island and beyond.
Wow.
But we don't know exactly the names of these groups. It's all prehistory. It's all before we have any written records. So we
And
can't.
that's what I was about to ask. So we don't know if this is what group of people that this ended up becoming or was or anything like that.
No, I think in popular, perception, they're built by the Picts, who are the
Yes.
people who we know from the late third century through to the ninth century are the native people of northeast Scotland, and they're called the Picts because the Roman sources describe them as a slur as the painted people,
The
which is a
painted
kind of
people.
saying they're so uncivilized. They paint their bodies, and we don't know if everybody painted their bodies, or this was just a slur aimed at them because they did something strange. But we've seen all manner, from the Disney film Brave. We've all got all our popular.
Assassin's Creed. I sent you
Yeah,
some pictures. Yep.
yeah, we've all got our perceptions of the Pict, but this is over 3,000 years. Well,
Before
hang on,
that.
that's almost 3,000 years before the Picts, right? But in popular perception, people say, "Oh, the Picts built these." No, no. But the twist comes that when Professor Richard Bradley's team from the University of Reading, of which I was part, excavated at the cairns, the central ring cairn, they found a scatter of cremated human remains outside the ring cairn, and they radiocarbon dated it, and it wasn't early Bronze Age. People had been coming back to these monuments in the Pictish period. So a local Pictish family, sometime in the mid first millennium CE, over 2,500 years, 3,000 years after these monuments were abandoned, were coming back and honouring these ancient burial sites. And they
So they
wouldn't
were
have
using it for
known.
a long
Yeah,
time.
no one would have known. Like, we've got to remember, I know people say, "Oh, well, oral histories go deep." Nobody's oral history up outside of Aboriginal Australia. Nobody's oral history goes back 3,000 years. So it's very
No.
unlikely that Pictish period peoples would have known a genealogy back to those times. What's more interesting is they probably thought these ancient tombs were really important because they were places where maybe they imagined were entrance points to other worlds. Maybe they thought of them as the residences of ancient kings and queens. We don't know the folklore, but we can imagine they saw these places as important and were still going back there to place their dead. And so that's one of the things I love about the Clava Cairns and why it meets my top 12 is
That makes it
because,
very, very, very interesting.
yeah, it's one of those sites, one of those prehistoric sites that gets reused in the early
It's a
medieval period.
bridge.
And that's my period of interest. So I'm
Right.
interested in the Anglo-Saxons, the Picts, the Vikings, the early medieval Welsh. That's my period. And I love the fact that those early medieval peoples were reconnecting to this past, even if it was not even a half remembered, but a completely legendary past. These sites
Right.
still have importance. And we see that in
It's still
Ireland too.
right.
Yeah,
That's still a bridge. It bridges time periods
yeah,
together, and it creates like okay, whoever was using this, there was a commonality that kept going, regardless if it was the same people groups or coming and going. Who cares? But there was some sort of commonality around this location,
Exactly.
that ties multiple time periods together.
Exactly. And